Thank you so much for that, Jane, and thank you to Astrolab for providing the lovely vinos that you have in front of you. And yes, thank you to Jane for her extraordinary contribution over the kind of 10 years that this festival has been going. Well, thank you all so much for coming out on a Saturday evening. It's great to see so many of you here, and I think it's going to be a fantastic session because it is a fantastic book and Emily is great talent. Now, Emily wrote her first book at just 26 and has been reeling in awards ever since. Alongside a book of short stories, plays and screenplays, she's written 5 novels. And the latest, Lioness, won this year's Acorn Prize for Fiction, which makes her one of a very few, possibly only 2, New Zealand writers who have won that, Fiction Book of the Year twice. Now, Lioness is sometimes disturbing, always thought-provoking, and often devilishly funny. And if you haven't read it, then I would very much recommend it. So please welcome Emily to the stage. Yeah. Now, I think we're going to start with a little reading, just to give you a little bit of a taste.
And kia ora everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is the most extraordinary festival, and I'm delighted to be here. And congratulations on it being the 10th one. All the authors are having a really good time, so I hope that the audiences are too. So this is the beginning of, not the very beginning, but it's from early on in the book, and it sets the scene. And if you don't know the book, and just to say that it's being narrated by a woman called Therese. Trevor and I met in the 1990s when I was not long out of university, having started in English Lit and ended up in marketing. This was back when university was free. I was the first in my small family to go. At that time, Trevor was a serial dater. He and Judith had been divorced a few years after she had fallen in love with a friend, another mother from the tennis club. The other woman wouldn't leave her marriage, but things between Judith and Trevor were, now, they agreed, over. They kept the details close, or as close as was possible in those scandal-loving circles. Judith asked Trevor not to tell the kids about her affair, and he didn't, and he'd suffered for that when the children were young. Even now they were adults, my God, middle-aged, they still thought the divorce was his fault. He'd gone wild for a while after the marriage ended, leaving the 4 children, Annabelle, Rob, Caroline and Heathcote, with their mother, while he travelled alone to Mexico, the Venice Biennale, sex parties in Berlin. When we were introduced in a cafe by a man I was pitching an idea for a stationery business, Trevor had recently returned from racing motorbikes in the Angolan desert. I'd never met anyone like him in my life. I make it sound like I knew what I was doing, pitching. In fact, I had met the other man, whose face I can recall vividly, but not his name, at the hotel where I was a receptionist. I was 22. Since graduating, my life had stalled. He was a regular business traveller, and he kept asking me out for coffee till I said yes. But not a date, I remember saying, and he laughed at me as if the idea itself was parochial. Of course not. That was why I was trying to sell him on my idea. I didn't want to lose control of the conversation. Trevor, who knew this man from school, swung a chair over from another table and made me tell him why I believed nice stationery was important. And I spoke earnestly because I really did think people should have pretty things. I told him stuff I never meant to, about the girls in my class with their glitter pens and scented rubbers, the longing those pastel colours had instilled in me, the orderliness they suggested, houses that were clean and cheery. How could anyone with a pom-pom on the zip of their pencil case come from a home where people called one another a dumb bitch? He listened, is what I mean. And the man, the business traveller, watched him watch me. And the next day, when he was waiting for his taxi before flying back to Auckland, he told me he would put in $2,000 for a proof of concept. By the way, he said, you're a pretty girl, but you'd do better if you straightened up that eye tooth. Feeling brave and rich, I called the number Trevor had given me to tell him that news and ask if maybe he would like to invest in the idea too. I'm heading into a meeting, but I'll call you back, he said. I'll be asking you out. You can decide whether business and pleasure mix. You can decide which is which, Theresa. I was still Theresa Holder then. I learned about his marriage on our first weekend away together when we were recounting for each other on that bed in his Marlborough house our pasts. Well, no, he told me his stories, but I didn't reveal mine. My life seemed trivial next to his. He was more than 2 decades older than me. I played the blank slate, which no girl is. Another thing I found out, but not till later, was he'd sent his old schoolfriend $5,000, more than double his investment, to clear the field. At the time, I thought that was romantic. A year after we met, Therese Thorne sold its first line of stationery into shops. That was the start of it all. What about Therese, he'd suggested, when we were designing a label? More aspirational than Theresa. And a last name's good too. It creates a character the shoppers can identify with, but not Holder. How about mine? Soon after we launched, he suggested that I myself drop Theresa and adopt the name Therese. Therese was the homeware designer and bright businesswoman. Therese relaxed in white shorts at the beach. Therese got that wonky eye tooth straightened so that she could open her mouth when she smiled. Therese didn't worry about what Theresa's parents might have thought. They just needed to get good seats at the wedding. First the brand had become Therese Thorne, then I did.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, that was such a key passage, that last little bit. I had also pulled it out because it encompasses this. I guess there are several ideas in the book, but 2 of them are about identity and this idea that we are all putting on a mask. I mean, what is in a name, and how do you choose them?
You mean the name for the characters?
Yeah.
Like, how do you decide on them? Oh, they have to sound right. They have to sound interesting and yet, to me, kind of slightly neutral enough that I could sustain them over a long-form piece of work. I think Therese was always Therese, and then I realised that she had started being Theresa. So that was something that sort of arrived as I was writing it. I thought, oh no, this woman, there's more to her background than I had initially understood. So that was where that came in. And then I think, there's a sort of school of thought which says that character names are all about the sound. And for me, that is largely true. And then you're sort of balancing names off against each other too. Like, you want a name to evoke something, but you can't have, say, too many names that end in an sound or an e sound, or too many one-syllable names. So there's this sort of mix of the feeling that they give you and maybe the associations they give you, and also how they work over the sort of over the fiction as a whole and against each other.
So that's the first mask, in a way, in terms of the way in which we encounter Theresa, who becomes Therese, the first thing, that the cloak that she puts on. I mean, is that how you see the world? Do you really think that we are all wearing masks? Oh,
I think absolutely. And if we weren't, it would be horrifying. There are limits to how much we want to see what's behind it, right? I think that masks are a question of survival. I think they're a question of being social creatures and living in community, and they're a way in which, we sort of hopefully build something, sort of construct our personalities out of, ideally sort of benign and kind of good and positive influences that are about sort of getting on with other people and all of that sort of thing. But, inevitably these other forces come in. And when I was working on an adaptation of Ibsen's play A Doll's House, I kept thinking about that Simone de Beauvoir line, that woman is not born, she is made. And, I think maybe the construction of personality and construction of, gender performance and that sort of thing is maybe easier for us to see in women than in men, because, there's a certain way in which, stereotypical masculinity still operates as a default, as the kind of wallpaper against which other things exist. And, I think it's the job of fiction and art in general to sort of pull out the things that we take for granted and show that there are masks everywhere, and for good and bad.
You mentioned the gender, which is gender identity and gender roles, and where we've ended up is a big theme in this book. And going back to the name, obviously, she doesn't just change from Teresa to Therese when she takes on this new persona of the kind of white linen sort of homeware business owner. She also takes on Trevor's name. And there's an interesting passage there where it says, had I started the company on my own, no one would have taken any notice. Even my lucky looks, enough to jailbreak me from my childhood, would not have drawn attention without him. Has feminism really failed so badly that that's where we've ended up?
I think the feminism has achieved so much, and it's important to really remember that and to not assume that some of the really, really hard-won changes and victories, are going to remain in place, without vigilance, but B, that they were handed over benignly. I mean, no, they weren't. Like, there was a lot of fighting that's gone on for a long time. And, in some ways it's sort of, awful and gave me pause. When I was halfway through writing this book, I thought, there's a way in which this book is a real cousin of the kind of feminist novels that populated my mother's bookshelves from the 60s and 70s, books like The Women's Room. There's an amazing writer called Lisa Alford. Does anybody know her work? Like funny, sexy, feminist books. And I did think, how many decades later am I writing this that still seems to have, to me at least, to feel, to have a sort of urgency in terms of the gender dynamics to it. And then my daughter, who was 22 at the time, read a proof copy, and she said, a lot of this is the stuff that my friends and I talk about too. Okay. And I, on one hand I was pleased because I was like, readers. And on the other hand I thought, oh no, these girls or the young women in their early 20s are still, sort of dealing with some of this socialised stuff. So, I don't know. I'm certainly not cynical about feminism at all, and I think it's really important to note its victories, but there's just ongoing work to do.
I mean, do you call yourself a feminist?
Yes. I mean, freely.
What does
that
mean to you then?
Well, I grew up in the generation where I think there was a concerted sort of, certainly in my world, which was a very sort of comfortable, like Pākehā middle class world, where women had maybe, been homemakers and raised children, my mother and her friends, but also there were women who were working, there were women who were considering their options and divorcing, there were all sorts of, different kinds of approaches, but also on some kind of social level, there were campaigns like, do you remember the Girls Can Do Anything? Yeah. So that, I was really raised with that idea, profoundly, that my gender wouldn't limit me in any way. And so in that sense, I think I was raised with a feminist sensibility. But then also you just look around at, there's sort of what I say and what I do, and they don't always match up. And that to me is incredibly rich territory for fiction, because there's a conflict often between one's values and the way one actually lives, or the society in which one lives. And I think sort of pulling apart those things is just something that I find really, dramatically interesting, comedically interesting.
So when we meet Therese, she is now middle-aged and could be described as having a middle-age crisis, identity crisis. Are they the same thing? I'm not sure. And then we have Claire. Do you want to just talk a little bit about Claire, because we didn't meet her in that
sure.
first
So early on in the novel, Claire, who is Therese's downstairs neighbour, has sort of had an impact on Therese, and they've had a particularly striking encounter, and they go on to have a series of more striking encounters until Therese sort of falls into Claire's kind of orbit. And Claire is a woman of Therese, partly because she's been married to an older man, and the circle she's moved in doesn't really feel that she identifies with women her own age. She sort of feels a bit like she doesn't particularly have friends her own age. Her stepchildren are closer to her age, but she's got an uneasy relationship with them. And so when this woman who's her own age, who already seems to have gone through some kind of life transformation, and seems to have done it pretty swiftly and kind of fundamentally, Therese becomes drawn to her. And Claire's situation is that her children have grown up and they've sort of left home, and her husband's gone off to Auckland on a job. She's suddenly in her apartment on her own, and she transforms the space into what becomes called in the novel a zone, where she can bring people in to take part in this kind of ecstatic dancing, where they're releasing all of their sort of socially kind of normalised ways of being and accessing some more bodily experience. So it does. We will be holding one later. I'm just going to say, if anybody wants to, we're not really going to.
So I wanted.
It's like audience participation. The two worst words in the English language.
Exactly.
No.
So I want to come back to the zone, but obviously, so we meet them in midlife.
Yes.
I guess you, I'm sure, have had no experience of perimenopause and menopause and midlife crises.
Never had a
so
midlife crisis,
why did you decide to write about it?
Yeah, well, as you're suggesting, it was not very far from my experience. I mean, I really felt like I started this book when I was in my late 40s maybe, and felt that I was, just approaching something that was going to mean a different phase of life. And it was to do with the fact that, my children were getting older and gearing up to leave home or had left home. But also, it just felt like a bit of a reckoning, really, like just a time to really reflect and think, hang on, have these old ways of being or old assumptions about systems and things kind of serve me? Which is not to say that I'd never thought these things before. I mean, of course I had. I was sort of quite, always been pretty politically engaged and stuff. But there was just something about, reaching this age that I found so liberating. Like really, really deeply freeing, but also unknown. The script is not as written as it is for younger women. And so I thought, I'll just explore some of these things in the book. And
brilliant. I'm going to get you to read that little passage. This is a
Should I do that now?
Glorious little passage that speaks to some of the different shades of midlife crises.
Yeah. Okay. So the book is kind of like, it's got these periodic little sort of rants in it, and I don't usually write in this way. I mean, I don't think I've written something that's quite as discursive as this before. And those were the things that often came earliest in my writing of it. And they were, sometimes they were me getting something out of my system. And I remember at a certain point showing Carl, my husband, some of these bits and saying, I really want to write the whole novel like this. And he said, maybe not the whole novel. So thank you, Carl. You've saved everybody from a big sort of ear chewing. Anyway, okay. So this is sort of through the point of view of Claire, and it's kind of as told to Therese. Some women retrain or take up volunteering or fall in love with their best friend or finally make partner or are squeezed out of the research lab they founded or become yoga instructors or raise surprise grandchildren or learn another language or dive into genealogy or run for local office, or quit booze, or drink too much, or make other people's problems their business, or give up altogether on other people's problems, or cry themselves to sleep, or can't sleep, or divorce, or remortgage, or develop a cackle, or get shingles, or go into real estate, or animal shelters, or floristry, or online activism, or have to look for a new place when the landlord raises the rent, or get fired or roboted out of a job, or have menopausal psychosis, or family addiction crises, or parents with dementia, or home subsidence, or violent kids, or terminal illness. Claire threw out her makeup, plonk, plonk, in the bin.
So as you can see, while it obviously covers some pretty deep thinking topics, it's also absolutely hilarious, which is what's one of the lovely things about this. But so Claire, she's a few steps ahead of Therese. She's already putting a blowtorch to her life to a degree.
She is. She's not as kind of highly trained as Therese is in being a pleasing person, and she's maybe never achieved quite the level of finesse that Therese has got by on. So it's maybe less of a stretch for her. I think Therese has got much further to travel, and as I wrote further into the book, I also started to think, maybe it's not that simple for Claire either.
Yeah, because I don't want to spoil things, but in some respects she goes through this journey and then almost comes full circle.
Yeah,
Nothing's black and white.
No, nothing is black and white. And I think at one point in the book, one of them says, or maybe it's probably Claire says something like, your family doesn't really want you to change. And I mean, that sounds quite depressing, but I think it's sort of a little bit true that in family systems, we want other people to fill the roles they've always filled, because that's stability and continuity, and that's how we know who we are. So when there is some kind of fundamental change going on with an individual within a family system or group, then everybody has to make an adjustment as well, which can be incredibly positive. But part of the novel is looking at just the discomfort of change, I think, and the fact that often it doesn't happen until stasis has become so uncomfortable that you have to do something.
So you mentioned the zone. So Claire's solution to her midlife crisis is to build a stage in her living room, get rid of all of her furniture and her makeup, build a stage in her living room with two old film prop lionesses looking on, and then dance away all her troubles. Yeah. Where on earth did this come from?
Well, I actually, the stage came to me in a dream, and then I thought, I wonder what happens there. And, it's sort of something about the writing process where I think you often try and get yourself in trouble. Like, you just want to follow, if something feels like it's got a mystery that you don't yet understand, but it's got some sort of heat or some sort of pulse to it that you're drawn to, I would rather write my way into trouble and then have to figure it out than sit back and make a decision. It's almost like the decision happens through the writing. And so I felt like it should be a place where there was something stripped back and something kind of revealed. And that could have been through speech, or it could have been through conversation. But honestly, the idea of writing that just felt really heavy, and that it would become really issuesy, and I didn't want to do that. And I was drawn to the way in which we kind of reach back into our bodies. Again, maybe it's to do with when you're going through menopause and different stages of aging, like your body's doing stuff that is no longer in your control. And there's something about that which is incredibly returning to some sort of, state where you have to recognise your animal status. And so that's where it sort of evolved.
So do you have a zone, a place or a thing that you go to kind of escape or lose yourself?
Yeah, no, not really. I think for me, the ultimate losing myself is when I'm writing, and that's just a rush like no other. But you kind of only get those. I've had two in the last 24 months, I think, moments like that where you're right. It's just, whoosh, it feels so good. But you have to do a lot of just sort of like writing to really get that feeling. But I am no stranger to the thrash it all out with the music being, the loud music at home and don't worry if the neighbours can see you and, just thrash it out in your living room.
I also wondered, is there a Claire in your life?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I've got my women friends are an incredibly important part of my life. And I think in some ways we are often clearing for each other, that's, yeah.
So another key thread in Lioness is, sorry, to give you a bit of context, obviously you can, from the initial passage, you can see that Trevor comes from a very moneyed family. Therese doesn't, and so there's some tension there, but then Trevor is trying to build a hotel and it gets caught up in this world of it. It's revealed that he may or may not have committed some shade of fraud in order to try and get this hotel over the line. And so a key thread in Lioness is this kind of uncomfortably comfortable world of wealth. Why did you decide to, explore the world of the wealthy?
Just so intriguing. I mean, I think class and its various forms and kind of ripple effects are, absolutely part of life in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and really maybe there's just always room to explore more of that. And, I think things have changed so much in terms of our kind of like perceived, our social values, or the sorts of things that I think we hold on to a version of New Zealand as a classless place, but it's, it's quite clearly not that's an illusion. So I did want to draw out some things about life in that world, and also to look at how glamorizing, literally in the sense of like, it might just put stars on your eyes, like it has, as it has done for Therese. It's one of the things that makes change not happen. She's got this material comfort. She's not come from security, and now she's got it, or she thinks she's got it. And I think that's a challenging environment for somebody who wants to change, because they're going to have to give something up. And, without wanting to be preachy or anything like that, I think that in order for important change to happen, a lot of people have to give things up. And there are ways in which we would, some of the characters in the book want that to be legislated. It'd be much easier. Somebody told me to do it. But I guess I'm trying to look at the idea that maybe personal change can, be a first step towards some other kind of opening and change in a worldview.
You quoted American writer Grace Paley, I think, who says that every good story should include blood and money. What do you mean by that, or what do you take from that?
Well, what I take from it, and she, I think, goes on to expand on it, and I think she talks about blood meaning like relations, family, and how we sort of connect with one another, and money being the sort of machinery of survival and life. And so I think that they are those things, they're very sort of core to our social experience, and I'm very much a social writer. Those are the things that interest me. Well, a lot of other things too, but I don't feel equipped to write about them. And also money is an amazing driver of story and plot. The business of either having too much or not having enough, or what to do with it, or where to get it, or all of that. There's always story around that. So I guess in the past, if I've been stuck with something, I've thought, hang on, what are the material conditions here, and how are they informing how people behave and what they want and how they go about it? So yeah.
So how? Well, I shouldn't make any presumptions, but as a writer and actor combo, I'm suspecting that you perhaps don't move in a world of wealth. So how did you, artist and writer, how did you go about researching that in terms of what that actually looks like in reality?
Well, there are people who can afford to buy paintings. Let's put it that way.
That's true, actually, I guess. But you do move in a world in some respects in terms of the
No, but
people
also I did just have my eyes open, and we moved from, we'd lived in London for a while and then Auckland and Wellington, and they're three cities where wealth takes on very different appearances, very, very different forms. And so having curiosity about that and looking at that was one of the things I was paying attention to. And then I read this fantastic book, sort of partway through, maybe I was on the second or third draft, by Stephen Eldred Grigg, called The Rich in New Zealand, A Social History, and it's utterly entertaining. And but he sort of, I think, published in the 90s, so it goes up to there, but it really does set the scene for this kind of, change in New Zealand around money and values, and so that was good research. But yeah, it's a funny one because there's a lot of overlap, I think. Even in just social ways in New Zealand that can still go on in worlds like media and the arts. And
you mentioned that wealth is displayed or manifest differently in different places, and I did wonder, I guess most Kiwis probably, if you think about wealthy Kiwis, you probably think Auckland, but the Lioness is set in Wellington. So why did you choose to
well, I
set it
wanted
there?
to write a Wellington novel. I was living in Wellington, and I just thought, I love reading a good Wellington novel. So I just thought it would be a fun challenge to do that and to really properly set something in a place, to have that in there quite early on. And also, there's something more nuanced and intriguing to me about the way money works there, because it's not flashy, and yet it is there, but the city itself can look very lacking in material support and governmental support resources. And there's also a lot, because this the kind of close geography. There's a lot of ways in which these, you see there's also a lot of poverty in Wellington, and a lot of people really doing it hard. So I liked the idea of having Therese live in a world where there was just, you had a sense that her bubble was a quite willful one, if that makes sense.
And when the zone kind of turns into, I don't know, a kind of collective ecstasy / orgy, which Trevor then goes on to call a cult, he asks Therese, was she given a cult name? And she says Therese, implying that actually that was the cult. Is that how you see the world of the kind of uber wealthy, or some kind of a little weird cult?
Well, I think any world where you're not encouraged to question the status quo, or where there's a really high price to pay for doing so, has got, is operating in the same way, in a similar way to what the fundamental sort of principles of a cult would be using. So that's, to me, my definition of a cult is somewhere where you have to swallow the story, you cannot question it. There is somebody who will tell you what to do, and you might experience a great freedom and, or sort of false liberation in handing decision-making over to that person. But, that could describe some people's marriages. I mean, it can describe all kinds of different situations. So, in that sense, I guess that's what Therese is saying. She's saying that she's bought into those aspects.
But she was happy until she wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the true? That's the problem with feminism, isn't it? It's kind of like, is it who gets to say, well, that's appalling. Is that the new feminism, that you can actually exercise choice even if the first wave feminists would think that your choice was a disgrace?
I feel like that was part of this sort of feminism, like when I was in my 20s and the 90s, it's sort of rise of like lad culture, and I was living in England, say from the mid 90s to the mid to 2005, and these magazine kind of like lad magazine culture was, we were being told, oh, this is feminist, like this is in some way, girls can be like boys or appeal to boys in a way that's, I don't know. It just seemed like can't even articulate it clearly because I'm still trying to figure out how we swallowed that for so long. So I don't know where I've gone with your question. Sorry, Nikki. But I guess I feel, are you asking me, is it a cheat for Therese to suddenly look around and go, hang on? Or
well, no, because she asks herself that, doesn't she? In a way,
she does.
She says, "It's." I understand that it's a bit convenient that I no longer kind of.
Yeah.
I want to throw off the more social mores of appearance, etc., while when I'm aging and when I'm losing the things that were acceptable. But no, just a more of a question, I suppose, of what does feminism look like today, and can you say to someone who's made a choice that's
well, I think there's a lot of I suppose personally, I think, and it's why it's like thank God for fiction, because it's so much harder to kind of pass these things out in real life. I do feel that the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? Like you should be able to kind of change some things or take some action just for the sake of that without having to be sort of totally morally hygienic and in some, absolutely unimpeachable way. Like I think this is where the left gets caught up in knots, actually, and we get in trouble with ourselves, where it's like, incremental change is still change, and that is how things can actually happen. So in that sense, I think everyone's got a right to make their decisions or their changes at any time, even if it happens to be a convenient time or it's being slightly forced on them by other circumstances. And that is how we often change. That is how we wake up to things. That is how, our belief systems kind of get expanded. So there's that. And then I suppose I think in a way my feelings are a bit different from the women in the book, because I think they might arrive at it at some point, but that the mission of feminism is totally, inextricably tied up with the mission to, in this country to really deal with the impacts of colonisation and to deal with the impacts of what we value in terms of, the material and the kind of capitalism that we practice and the kind of social welfare that we've abandoned, and not entirely, but, to many extents. So I don't particularly relish being on a soapbox about that, but that is, I think it's all inextricably interconnected, but that steps have to be taken often in small ways first. But, I'm not a proselytizing writer. I'm not a didactic writer. I'm drawn to fiction because I think things are complicated and that we, behave in incredibly human ways all the time. And I'm drawn to the sort of, to the flaws and the fallibility and.
Because how do you feel about Trevor? Because Trevor, he's arguably the villain. You have that incredibly jarring right in the first chapter that he pays off the rival with $5,000. But in some respects, has he done anything wrong? He's not an asshole to her.
Well, I didn't want to make him one at all.
No.
I thought, for a start, that would be really patronising to Therese. Like, she's not going to spend her whole life with someone who's just a total, jerk. And also I didn't think it'd be interesting for any reader. Like, who wants to just read this sort of like, oh, he's a villainous property developer? No, that's a stereotype and a cliche. And so I suppose what I was drawn to were the ways in which often people who are making change and making material things happen in the world, like building things, literally building things the way Trevor is, have got this wonderful force of personality and charisma and charm, and that, that's enticing. And those are things that I think are really lovely social values as well. So I wanted to give him some of that energy. And I mean, he has a couple of sort of low moments in the story where you think, oh, I wish he hadn't said that. But I don't see him as a villain at all.
Have you seen Succession?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah, so there are shades of Succession in some of Trevor's children, particularly Heathcote, who reminded me of Ronan.
Yeah.
But do you, so this is the kind of classic, I don't know, how would you describe Heathcote?
It's weird. I mean, so Heathcote is the youngest son of Trevor and his first wife, Judith, and he's, in fact, Heathcote is a family name. It's also the name of one of their kind of inherited properties, and he's lost. He's a lost soul. He's had so much kind of given to him that I think it's undermined him in a weird way. I guess my reading of it would be that because he's never been allowed to sort of fall on his face or to really experience consequences, he's torn between feeling indestructible and that he could do anything without consequence, but also that, gosh, the consequences must be really bad if I've never been allowed to feel one. So he's kind of operating out of a kind of fear as well. I really actually feel terribly sorry for him, and I know that's a strange thing to say about the most annoying character in the book, because he's undoubtedly super annoying.
Do you know anyone like that
my heart a wee bit
in real life? I wondered.
Oh no, the characters aren't really based on people at all. No.
Yes, I did.
But what? No, sorry, that's my husband. I can say no. I suddenly realised I better explain that I wasn't just being really disdainful and rejecting a request from a regular audience member.
Me on Twitter in 2 minutes. Emily Perkins was so rude.
So rude. Sorry, Carl. Maybe later, darling.
You mentioned, are they entirely fictional? Because I did think of Wellington property developer who used to own a football team.
Oh, no. I don't know that.
Okay, that's fine.
Somebody said to me a while ago, oh, did you base it on da-da-da-da-da?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, not at all. And and I thought I did quite a lot of research.
You haven't had a lawyer's letter yet? You haven't had a lawyer's letter yet?
No, and I'd really rather not have one. I mean, I did my absolute best research-wise to ensure that I wasn't, overlapping with reality in any way, but I missed that one. That's a little bit disturbing.
Sorry, I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay. Do you want to do a little reading?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Cool. So this is a bit, just to get into the sort of early days of Therese and Claire's friendship. Therese and Trevor are hosting a Christmas party, and one of the things, that's sort of an early sign that all is not well, is that he's being investigated, or the councilman who has worked with him on giving the permissions to create the hotel is being investigated to see if all the processes were properly followed. So there's been an abatement put on the hotel, and there's been something in the paper, and it's just not looking that good. Not that many people have come to the party. So that's the first kind of little ominous sign. It's just quite a short section here. As I surveyed the small scattering of guests half an hour later, I had the feeling that not only Mick's, but everyone's conversation was simply a checklist of acceptable gestures. There was no oomph to the room, no guts, and I sensed that all too easily the few people who had come could drift out again, and it would be as if the party had never happened. The exception was Claire, who was speaking to Flat Tax. There's a friend of Trevor's who Therese calls Flat Tax because that's all he talks about, was secluded intensity, as if they were the only guests. The eye patch, she's wearing an eye patch, gave her a piratical air. I ducked into the bedroom to check my phone. People blamed their absence on the rain. So sorry, along with crucial last-minute shopping, surprise house guests, sudden illness, and in one case, the death of a pet. So sorry, so sorry, so sorry. Have a great time. Disappointed to miss it. If I don't see you before next year. No one mentioned the article, which confirmed its effect. Those are the ones who sent in messages at all. The rest of them simply didn't come. I headed back to my guests and introduced a few neighbours to my hairdresser. I noted that she left as soon as it was decent to do so, and I couldn't blame her. I wished the others would leave too. I hated them for being witnesses. I hated Trevor's hearty laugh ringing through the room. As he walked past me to get a drink, I asked how he was getting on. He kissed my temple. The Santa hat bobbled on his head. I found Claire on the balcony vaping. Outdoor lights shone up through the leaves of the larger pot plants, turning her yellow dress almost gold. What happened to your eye? It was rude to ask, I knew, but I had to be rude to someone. Oh, she said, face work gone wrong. She mimed injecting her forehead and made a clicking noise. Again, I thought of her dream about Trevor and the gun, and she's earlier told Therese that she had a sex dream about Trevor involving a gun, which made Therese sit up and take notice. Really? I didn't know anyone who admitted to stuff like this. Oh, you know how it is. You work so you have the money, but you look tired from working, so you spend the money on not looking tired so you can keep doing well at work so you can make the money. Basically, capitalism came on my face. I laughed in shock. This is our second conversation about sex in a fortnight. Oh, maybe it's because I've gone off my antidepressants. I can finally have orgasms again. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting how to talk normally. She gave me an amused look, as if life was absurd and we should just enjoy it, and a surge of elation hit me. I glanced through the plate glass windows at my struggling party. I should be in there circulating food. Why did you go off them, the pills? My youngest is leaving home, she said. The only reason I stayed on them so long is the family liked me better that way. I stared disbelieving, but she locked my gaze with her one implacable eye. Did they actually say that? Yep, Claire took a hit of her vape pen. It's great being a mum. I've only got Trevor's kids, I said. We've got adult children. Sounds like a diagnosis. I didn't know what to say to that. Even after all this time, I was not quite on home territory with his children. For a start, I was much closer to their age than his and often felt that around them I was cosplaying an older person. Over the years, we'd made a lot of behind-the-scenes effort, but I behaved as though my eye was on my work and I was happy to let family dynamics just evolve. Making things look easy isn't always a smart move. Maybe I should have done it the other way around, made the children feel like the most important thing.
Brilliant. So, how is middle age treating you, Emily?
Oh, it's just sorry to say I love it. Absolutely.
Don't be sorry.
I mean, no, it's really, it's great. I mean, I am, things are fun and interesting and intriguing. And I think it is partly that thing I was sort of alluding to earlier of you feel like the script is less written. There are different ways of being. I mean, we're, at the moment, things are good. I mean, you're always aware that anything can happen at any time. But yeah, no, I think there's something just very energising about this time of life.
You mentioned yesterday...
And HRT also. Yeah.
You mentioned yesterday that obviously this has been a while in coming. I think is it 11 years since? And that you were a bit nervous, I guess, about sending it out into the world. Can you explain, I guess, how that came about?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think maybe that's one reason I'm feeling sort of like, a bit freer, because I was quite burdened by the fact that it was taking me so long to finish this book, and in fact, any book at all. And it felt, I was teaching creative writing, but the years were just going by so quickly. And I suddenly look around and it was, 8 years since I published something, 9 years, 10 years. And that was scary because I just didn't know if I could finish a book again. And I was writing drama projects and they were easier in a way because they were collaborative and you're sort of slightly buoyed up by other people's involvement. But no, I was really, really quite afraid that I wouldn't be able to finish it. And, it did go through lots and lots of drafts. And then, it took so long that my publisher had retired. So I was like, I hoping that the publishers would take it. And there's so many stages of writing where you just kind of, I think of, the old Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons where there's a cliff here and a cliff here, and Roadrunner just sails across, and Wile E. Coyote goes halfway across and then looks down and goes, wah! And it's not till you look down that you sort of plunge and hit the bottom. And I think there's so much of writing that's like that, where you're just trying to take the leap from one cliff to another and not look down. Yeah.
I mean, and you've obviously won the big prize. Have you had much reader feedback?
Yeah, what's been nice is that people, the ones who enjoy it are letting me know. Let's put it that way. It's been really lovely, that sense that it's being read and that people are reading it and then they're recommending it to other people. And so, yeah, that's great.
And I understand that someone has bought the film rights.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
that's exciting. So how will that process work?
Well, it's very early days in terms of all of that. So, I mean, that will be sort of as yet to be revealed. But yeah.
Would you want to write the screenplay?
There might be some involvement. I mean, have done some work, in television kind of writers' rooms on other people's projects, and I really love doing that. So, yeah, sort of TBC. Yeah.
What do you hope that readers take from Lioness?
Well, I think I always hope that that a book is open enough that readers can bring their own selves to it, that just like Paul Auster would say, there needs to be enough space in the writing for the reader to inhabit. And there's something about that idea of habitation that really chimes for me, that, when a book is working on me, when I feel like I'm just walking around inside its world, it's my world too, whether it's like we were talking about the book I've just finished reading, Circe by Madeline Miller, this is in the world of Greek mythology, but I was there and I was walking around in it and feeling it and experiencing it because it's just written in such a captivating way. So, yeah, that's what I would hope, that, readers can really enter it and, have their own feelings and their own responses.
How often do readers come back with a completely different interpretation? Like, can you think of any examples of that? Must be weird.
I was telling Rachel King this the other night. I wrote a short story that was published in a newsroom a couple of years ago, and there was a central character who, to my mind, was the sort of neutral kind of focalizing point of the story and not the villain. And somebody came back to me and said, I think that woman is really bad news. She's like, she's the villain of the piece, right? And I thought, oh, I don't know what that says about me, because there was more of me in her than anything else. But in that case, you have to go, yeah, why not? To you, she's this unspeakable person. So, who am I to argue with that?
Yeah.
I think readers absolutely have got their own, the right to make their own reactions.
What's next?
Another novel, some other sort of scripty work, and just trying to get into a bit more of a routine. I've been a bit all over the place lately. But
Well, it is a fabulous novel, and I would suggest that you all read it, but we do have a bit of time for questions. If anyone would like to ask a question, please, as I said, wait for the mic to get to you so that we can all hear your question.
Hi, Emily. I'm curious about the covers, because the first edition had a very different cover. Could you talk about the change of covers?
Yeah, so they're both by the same designer, who's this brilliant in-house Bloomsbury designer. And the first one he came up with is the first one that I was shown, and I just loved it instantly. It's sort of a woman who's kind of on fire from within, and there's a scene in the book where there's a portrait of Trevor's first wife, Judith, that catches on fire, and that was one of the things that he'd taken inspiration from. And I loved that. I felt like it really got a sort of essence of the book. And then it's the sort of usual practice for there to be a reissue about a year later. So it's moved from, like in the UK, it's moved from hardback to paperback. And here it's moved from trade paperback to a B format paperback. And I love a B format paperback. It's actually my favourite kind of format. But yeah, at that point they came up with the new cover, and they, just felt that it was more suited to the B format paperback market, and it's like great. So it's sort of got, it's a publishing move, and I love having both covers. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions for Emily?
One of the things that I like about your book is it's the balance. I guess my question is going to be about getting the balance between enough detail about things like gestures and expressions and thoughts and all of that, without too much unnecessary baggage. Creative writing courses often strike all of this stuff out, and you end up with something very sparse. But how do you go about getting that balance between, or how much editing do you do to kind of get the balance between detail that gives you those kind of insights without being baggy?
It is a process sometimes of editing. I mean, I think you find the voice for the work, and you, which takes a really long time. Like that's what took, most of the time kind of getting going on this novel for me. I think the first draft was just, didn't work for me at all, kind of vocally. There was no interest in it. And it wasn't narrated by Therese at that point. So it was sort of only when I started putting it in her voice and in this first person voice that I felt like I had enough layers and things to play with. And so that helped me, because then you're sort of working within what an actual character might notice. So I think that sort of slightly puts some limits on how much you're going to run on and on. And then, there's just that editing process of, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that. I might write something that's got, 3 adjectives, and then you just got to cut it down to 1. But it's sort of, I felt that her world is comfortable and pleasurable to inhabit. And so I wanted to have enough of that in the language too, this idea that it is a little bit like sitting on a lovely, set of cushions, and that it's not too bony and sparse. I don't think that would have been fitting for her voice and her world. So I guess all of those things are going on sort of like unconsciously, and then when you come to edit, you're a bit more conscious of it.
Did you start in the third person and then change to the first person?
Yeah.
And you found that?
The first person is really what kicked it into life for me, yeah. So, and that's happened to me before as well. It's just all about, like, whose story is it? For early drafts, focus much more on the Claire character, and then I thought Therese was just going to be a kind of neutral observer, and then it was like, oh no, it's definitely really her story. So,
thank you. Any more questions?
Other end.
Thanks, Emily. Can you talk a little bit about the scene with Claire where she has the kind of ecstatic experience? It's quite a...
oh.
Yeah. It's kind of its own story in itself, and whether you've had an experience like that, or what the inspiration for that was.
Yeah, no, I haven't had an experience like that, but I just I suppose I'm drawn to the idea that she would be brave enough to do it, and to sort of spend all night out and, walking through Te Ahumarangi, and that, there was this, I guess, correlation between the physical and the sort of psychological that just gave, sort of dramatized for me. And, there was a point at which I thought, I wonder if this needs to be in the same point of view as the rest of the book. But I quite liked the idea of it just being in there, sort of being the one thing that breaks the rule. So that's another reason why it's kind of focused on her. And but I guess partly what's underneath it for me too is that, again, we're careful about where we walk, right? Like, we're careful about where we walk, when we walk there, what we do when we're walking, what we're paying attention to. That is a reality of being a woman in the world, and that's something that I hope her action, or for me, it gestures to a kind of resistance to that. And yeah, that's really where it was coming from.
Thank you.
Well, look, we have run out of time, and I think that's a nice place to leave it. It's been a fantastic session. Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you for coming down, and thank you all for coming out this evening.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Yeah.
And Emily will be outside after the session signing books, and so please join me in thanking Emily for that fantastic book.